The United States Treasury Department just issued a Level 3 sanctions alert on Burkina Faso. That is the same level they used for North Korea, for Iran, for Venezuela, for a landlocked country in West Africa with no nuclear weapons, no navy, no intercontinental missiles. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself what Burkina Faso has that makes Washington nervous enough to reach for its most powerful economic weapon. The answer is not oil, not uranium, not debt. The answer is gold. And the man who just decided it belongs to the people it came from. Stay with me. Before we get to what Traoré did, before we talk about the sanctions, the emergency calls, the 3 private jets that landed in Accra within 6 hours of his announcement, I need you to understand something. Something they never taught you. In the year 1324, a man named Mansa Musa left the city of Niani in the Mali Empire and walked toward Mecca. He brought with him 60,000 soldiers, 12,000 servants, and 80 camels, each carrying 300 pounds of gold. When he arrived in Cairo, he was so generous with his gold, giving it freely to the poor, to merchants, to anyone who approached him, that he accidentally crashed the Egyptian economy. The price of gold in North Africa did not recover for 20 years. That is not poverty. That is not a people waiting to be saved. That is the wealthiest human being who has ever walked the face of this earth, and he was African. But Mansa Musa did not appear from nothing. He was the product of a civilization that had been building for centuries, the Mali Empire, which at its peak controlled more than half of the world's gold supply, half of the world's gold. In the 14th century, the gold did not disappear. It was still there in the ground in West Africa, in the land that today we call Burkina Faso, Mali, Ghana, Guinea. What changed was not the gold. What changed was who controlled the decision about where it went. And for 400 years, the answer was not the people who lived above it. That is the wound. That is the theft, not the failure. But here is what you need to understand today. The theft has never stopped. It simply changed its costume. The colonial flag came down. The IMF flag went up. Independence was the costume. The system underneath stayed exactly the same until 3 weeks ago. On the morning of October 14th, President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso convened what was described officially as a national economic sovereignty meeting. 47 people in the room, ministers, military commanders, 3 economists from the University of Ouagadougou, and, according to a source who was present, 1 man who had flown in from Accra the night before, carrying a briefcase. Nobody knew who he was. He was introduced only as a technical advisor. At 9:47 a.m. Traoré stood up. He was wearing his military uniform. He was wearing the red beret. He looked, according to witnesses, entirely calm. He placed a single document on the table. The document was titled Declaration of Monetary Sovereignty, Burkina Faso, Year 1. What it contained was this: Burkina Faso would immediately begin the process of issuing a parallel national currency, not replacing the CFA franc immediately, but creating alongside it a new instrument backed 1-to-1 by gold reserves held within Burkina Faso's borders. Not in Paris, not in the Banque de France, where African gold has been held since 1945, within Burkina Faso's borders. The document further stated that all gold mined in Burkina Faso, by any company, foreign or domestic, would henceforth be subject to a 60% physical deposit requirement. 60% of every ounce extracted must be deposited with the new Burkina Faso National Gold Reserve before any export is permitted. Currently, that figure is less than 3%. 3%. For every $100 of gold pulled from Burkinabe soil, the people of Burkina Faso received 3. Traoré just changed that to 60. The technical advisor from Accra opened his briefcase. Inside were legal templates, drafted with input from monetary economists in Moscow and Beijing, outlining the architecture of the new reserve system. The meeting lasted 4 hours. By 2 p.m., Traoré had signed the document. By 6 p.m., the United States Treasury Department had issued its alert. I need you to hear this next part carefully, because this is not just an African story. In 1865, the Civil War ended. 4 million black Americans were free in theory, and for a brief, extraordinary moment, there was a plan. Special Field Order Number 15, 40 acres and a mule, 40 acres of confiscated Confederate land per family, the beginning of black land ownership in America. It lasted less than a year. Andrew Johnson revoked it. The land went back to the former slaveholders. What was taken? The material foundation of generational wealth, the ability to pass something forward. It was not the last time. In 1921, Greenwood, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, 300 black-owned businesses, the most prosperous black community in America, banks, law firms, hospitals, a private plane owned by a black man. It was burned to the ground by a mob that included local law enforcement and, according to declassified documents, National Guard aircraft. Rebuilt? Yes, partially, in time. But the insurance claims were denied. The city refused reparations. The land was rezoned. Brick by brick, the wealth was redirected. 307 Black Wall Streets. 307 times black Americans built generational wealth. 307 times it was burned, seized, or legislated out of existence. The pattern is not a coincidence. The pattern is a policy. And the policy is this: wherever black people concentrate wealth, a mechanism appears to extract it. That mechanism has a name in Africa. It is called the CFA franc. It is called the Banque de France reserve requirement. It is called the IMF structural adjustment program. It is the same mechanism, different name, same function. Traoré just jammed the mechanism. That is why Washington reached for the sanctions toolkit they use for nuclear states. Within 24 hours of Traoré's signing, three things happened. First, the CEO of AngloGold Ashanti, a South Africa-based mining company with operations in Burkina Faso, called an emergency board meeting. Their Burkina Faso operations represent 18% of total company revenue. Under the new 60% deposit rule, that revenue structure collapses entirely. The company's stock dropped 7.3% before the New York Stock Exchange opened the next morning. Second, France's Minister of Economy placed a call to Traoré. Traoré did not take it. The call was transferred to a deputy minister who listened politely for 11 minutes and said, "We will review your concerns in accordance with our national sovereignty charter," and hung up. Third, a leaked memo. I want to be precise here. I am describing a document that circulated among Francophone African leaders, described a proposed coalition response from 5 French-aligned West African governments, urging Burkina Faso to reconsider the declaration in exchange for debt relief. Traoré's response to the coalition memo was one sentence: "We did not ask for their chains to be made of gold instead of iron." The memo was not answered further. And then, this is the part they do not want you to know, the man from Accra, the technical advisor with the briefcase? He was not alone. Within 48 hours, representatives from Mali and Niger, both AES alliance members, arrived in Ouagadougou for unscheduled meetings. 3 countries, 3 leaders, 1 monetary framework being discussed. The CFA franc zone has 26 member states. If 3 of them exit together, the entire architecture of French monetary control in Africa begins to fracture. That is not speculation. That is mathematics. I want to tell you about Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1921. You know the fire. You know the plains. What they did not teach you is what came after. Within 5 years, Black Tulsans had rebuilt 90% of Greenwood, with no insurance payouts, no government support, with their own labor, their own money, their own community networks. They rebuilt it, not because they were waiting for permission, not because the government offered them a program, because they understood something fundamental. The wealth was never in the buildings. The wealth was in the people who built them. Do you understand what that means? You can burn the bank. You cannot burn the banker's knowledge. You can seize the land. You cannot seize the mind that figured out how to build on it. Black Americans built generational wealth 3 times in the 20th century alone. 3 times it was taken by force, by law, by policy. And 3 times, from the rubble, your people looked at each other and said, "We know how to do this. We have done it before. We will do it again." The Black Panther Party's free breakfast program, launched in 1969 with no government funding, fed 20,000 children per day across 16 American cities within 2 years. 20,000 children per day, from donations, community organizing, and the revolutionary idea that hungry children cannot learn. The government was so threatened by that program, a breakfast program, that the FBI classified it as the greatest internal threat to national security. A breakfast program. SNCC's organizing networks in the 1960s were more sophisticated than most Fortune 500 companies' communication systems. Multi-state, multi-node, redundant, secure. They built it with no technology, with rotary phones and handwritten notes and the trust of people who had every reason not to trust anyone. That is what runs in your blood, not the memory of chains, the memory of what your people built when the chains came off and kept building when the next set of chains arrived. Traoré is not building something new. He is building something that is as old as Mansa Musa, as old as Timbuktu, as old as every black hand that ever turned gold from the earth and asked, "Who decided I don't get to keep this?" You share that blood. An invoice 400 years overdue. The balance is still due. Here is what I want you to do with this information. Not feel inspired for 20 minutes and then scroll to the next video. Not share it and feel like you did something. Understand what is actually happening. A 36-year-old man in West Africa is doing what economists said was impossible, restructuring the monetary relationship between Africa and its former colonizers, not with an army, not with nuclear weapons, but with a document and the willingness to sign it. He is not waiting for the UN. He is not waiting for Washington's approval. He is not asking France's permission to keep his country's gold. He signed the paper, and the most powerful financial institutions on earth reached for their most powerful weapons within 6 hours. That tells you everything about who was benefiting from the arrangement before. Now here is your question, not Traoré's question, yours. Where's your gold? Not the metal, the gold. The thing you have built that keeps being taken, the wealth that keeps being extracted, the community that keeps being redlined, rezoned, defunded. Where is it? And who has the document that says they are allowed to keep taking it? Find the document. Name the document, and then understand Traoré did not ask permission to change the document. He changed it. An invoice 400 years overdue. The balance is still due. They cannot keep collecting forever.